Hey folks, this is Cindy. Thanks so much for stopping by. In today's video, we're going to be talking about Copic coloring in white. I'm going to be sharing the Altenew Engagement Wishes stamp set. This was from their release yesterday. I will have another video link down below. It was a part of the blog hop. I shared the Wispy Begonia stamp set in that, and it's pretty similar to this in that we are keeping things simple with a very minimal blending combinations. That one yesterday was a pink flower. Today's flower is going to be white, and I love coloring in white images because they are so simple. Really, at the end of the day, the only thing you're coloring in when you're coloring in white is the shadow and shade. It does not matter what colors you're using, it's where you're putting those colors that count. I have a piece of expressive blending card. This is cut down to 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. I do have some Simon Says stamp masking paper cut out for my masks, and I am stamping this in the Altenew limestone ink. Now it looks pretty dark now, however it will dry back and get lighter as I color this in, and by the time I'm done coloring it in, you're not even going to notice that this ink was that dark. It's just going to look like no line coloring. I also want to do some ink blending on this, so I do have my card panel masked off here. I have this in about 1/2 inch on all 4 edges. I have all of my masks on my images. I am starting with the Altenew ink in Volcano Lake. That's actually my mid-tone ink. I didn't mean to start with that. Totally did, but it's fine. Then I go in with the Altenew Lagoon ink. This is my darkest ink, and I am trying to keep this as close to that image as I possibly can. We don't want to bring this out too far. We're just kind of trying to create a little bit of a faux shade with this darker ink color. If you bring that out too far, you're going to kind of lose that a little bit. So keep it as close as you possibly can. And then when I'm done blending out the Lagoon ink, I'll come back in with a Volcano ink or Volcano Lake ink, and then I'll bring that out just a little bit more. I'm going to go right up the side there on the top left and a little bit here on the lower right. Not too far on that lower right because I want to keep that as light as I possibly can. But I do need some of that ink up alongside those edges there because it will reinforce that faux frame once I pull off all of this labeling tape. And then I'm going to finish this off with the Mountain Mist. I'm going to bring this up towards the top right, but I am going to let this blend out to white in that top right hand corner. We don't need any ink there. As long as we have the majority of this ink blended, it's actually going to tell the eye that we have a full faux frame here, and plus I'm going to be adding some sentiments to this later, so that will help with that as well. Now I'm going to dive right into my coloring here. I have the Copic in BV20. I'm just adding this in where my darkest shade is going to be, and I'm going to take this slowly. I'm not going to tackle this whole flower at one time because there is a lot going on here. What I don't show you is I don't have my stamp on that backing sheet from the packaging. I've left that off, and as I color this in, if I start to feel like I'm a little confused, like I can't see the shape, I'm just going to lay that backing sheet right over the top of this. I'm going to line that up so it can see where my lines are going to be. Once I know what direction I'm going with this or where I need to add that shade, then I can take that out of there and start coloring, and I'm good to go. I'm adding this BV20 where the darkest shadow is supposed to be, or where the shaded area was supposed to be, and then I'm going to bring in a B60 and I'm going to blend that BV20 out really well. I am not scrubbing, but I'm making sure that it's nice and saturated, and I'm bringing that out into that white. However, I am going to make sure that I leave myself plenty of white, because that's part of the trick, is you need it to have white in order for it to be white, but you need to make sure that you have enough color down into those shaded areas so that your eye reads it as shade. I could use any color I'd want right here, right now. It does not matter. I could use browns. I could use blue-greens. I could use pink. It doesn't matter as long as I have it in the right areas and I'm still allowing quite a bit of that white paper to show through. Also, it's going to look really dark right now, and only because we don't have any other color reference going on. But once I finish coloring this in, you're going to see a world of difference. Last week, I shared the Penny Black bundled up stamp. It was a snowman, and when I started coloring in his face, he looked crazy dark. It looked like I had a blue-violet snowman, but by the time I was done coloring everything in, and I had that color reference surrounding my snowman's face, he just looked like a round white snowman, exactly like he's supposed to look. And that is the same principle with this. It doesn't matter what you're coloring in white, folks. It is the same thing and the same approach every time. It is so valuable to keep that in mind. There's the saying that it's going to look bad until it doesn't. That definitely applies to coloring in white images. And also keep going until you're done, folks. You're not going to know what you have until you've gone from beginning to end, and then you can reassess it. Then you can make your decisions on how you feel about it and what it looks like, and if it looks good or if it doesn't look good. But definitely keep at it. It's going to look bad until it doesn't. I have more information on this over on my Patreon. There's a full-length real-time version of this card and this video there, so you should definitely check that out. I will have that link down below, as well as over on my blog. There's tons and tons of information in that video. All right, so I'm going to finish up this flower. I'm not going to show you the whole thing because I pretty much do the same thing on the whole entire flower. I'm adding that BV20 down in those darkest shadow areas, dark where I need that shade, blending that out with that B60. And then I'm taking in my colorless blender and I push back some of that B60 from the white space towards the B60, not the B60 out into the white space, because I don't want to lose necessarily any of that B60. I'm just trying to soften it, and I don't want that colorless blender to model it at all. So white to B60, not B60 to white. Now I'm going to color in my leaves. I'm starting with the B34. I'm going down the center. I want this to look like it has a nice deep crease running right down that center. Also, these leaves were illustrated to look like they had some movement. They look like they're kind of bending and folding a little bit. So I'm adding that B34 down in those areas, but I'm not adding it to all of them, just some of them. I'm also working from the edge towards the center, and then I'll go back towards that center, back to that center, and I'll work my way out. I'm literally starting at that line and I'm flicking out towards the edges. On some of these, I'll meet some of those flicks from the center up with the coloring I had done along those edges, because it's going to add a little bit more texture and variation, a little bit more depth in this leaf by doing that. Once I'm done with that B34, I'm coming in with that YG17. I'm going right over the top of that B34 and bringing that out just a little bit past that, especially here along those edges. I'm making sure that I've got some nice, good coverage there. Now, there's some of these bends and folds in the edges of these leaves that I hadn't gone in with that B34, but I'm going to add that YG17 to those. It's just going to be a little bit lighter, but I'm still going to get that color variation out of them. In real life, you would have some of those different values, those different shades in those colors. So you definitely want to make sure that you're not going in too heavy with all of the shade, and you want to make sure that you're adding some shade as necessary as well. Hopefully that makes sense. It's super important that you do that, folks. It really helps a bunch when coloring this off. Plus, these leaves are really big. You have a lot of white space to color, so you can afford to go in and add some of those darker colors, and you're still good to go. I am going to finish this off with the YG03. You could definitely do a YG13 on this if you would like. I liked a little bit more muted color of that YG03, and also, at this point, I was thinking I was going to finish off the center of that flower a little bit more on the yellow-green side. I don't share it with you here in the video because I did struggle with it a little bit. Again, I talk about that more over on Patreon. However, I'm going to skip it today, folks. I really hadn't a plan when I went in to do it, and I didn't end up recording what I actually did do, and I would have done it differently knowing what I know now anyway. Now that I have all of my Copic coloring done, I can start working on my colored pencils here. I'm starting with this periwinkle, and as I add that periwinkle in to those darker shaded areas, I decided that I can go just a little bit darker. So I am going to bring in the indigo blue, and as you can see, I have a very, very sharp pencil, and look how far back my hand is on that pencil. I have it that far back so I can go in with a much lighter hand. Now, as I color this in, I kind of catch myself a few times going in a little bit heavier. I have my fingers up a little bit closer to the tip of that pencil, and that kind of forces your hand to go a little bit heavier. So I catch myself and I kind of pull back a little bit, and that makes a big difference. Well, ideally what you want to do is kind of take it easy, take it slow. I'm going one petal at a time, and I'm going in really light. And as I color this in, I can reassess it. By the time I'm almost done with it, I can take this coloring in as a whole, and I can decide on whether or not I do want to go in darker in any areas or just leave them. I do end up deciding that I'm going to go in a little bit darker with that indigo blue, but I wait till I'm almost done before I make that decision. You really need to make sure that you have the majority of it in place, because if you don't, typically what ends up happening is you start going in heavier, because right now you're thinking, wow, I really need some darkness in here, but not necessarily, not until you're done. So, or almost done. So definitely hold off till almost the end before you make that decision. I'm also still making sure that I'm leaving myself plenty of white paper here. Again, we just want a white flower, folks. All we're doing is trying to achieve a white flower. So we just need that shade in there, but it does not need to cover over everything. I also want to add a little bit more interest to this flower. So I am going to use the Prismacolor Deco Yellow, and I'm going right up where the center of that petal would meet the center of this flower. And I'm going pretty light. Now I do have this sped up, but you can still see how long it's taking me to add that color. And that's because I'm going in so light and I'm building up that color as I need it. I can always add more. It's harder to take it away. I'm also going to have the ribbons, or the Tulips and Ribbons workshop link down below. That's from Vanilla Arts. I knew that I wanted to color this flower in white, and when I was trying to decide which whites I was going to use for it, I looked down at my to-do pile and my projects that I needed to get done or would like to get done, and the Tulips and Ribbons project was sitting right there on top, and I decided these colors will actually work out great. I like good color combinations that you can use on all sorts of things. Amy uses these on tulips, but they still work wonderful on this particular flower. I'm not 100% certain what the flower is, but it still looks pretty, and I love that. I love being able to have a really nice versatile color combination for those kinds of things. And you wouldn't even need to necessarily stick with just florals for this color combination. You could use this on all sorts of things. You could use this on animals. You could use this on inanimate objects. This would be a really great color combination for just about anything in white. Now, after I was done with this, the only thing that I would have done differently, particularly on this card in terms of color, is I would have actually done a different ink blending on it. I probably would have used a little bit more blues than the blue-green. I think the blue-green background works out exceptionally well on the Tulips and Ribbon. However, I just didn't feel like it was quite right on this card, but that's just me. You could definitely use anything you'd like. And again, I love the background on Tulips and Ribbon, just not so much on this one. The other thing I would change on this card is I would not put any sentiments on it. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about how I never use sentiments. So I decided this time I was going to, and I hate it. So if I were to do this card again, I would definitely skip that, but whatevs. It's done. It's good to go. It's fine anyway. All right, so now I'm going to color in these leaves. Again, both of these leaves are colored in exactly the same. I'm using the indigo blue. I'm going right over the top of that B34 and a few areas of the YG17. I'm doing something a little bit different with this leaf today than what I typically do. I'm actually only going to use 2 colored pencils. I'm going to use this indigo blue, and again, I'm going over the top of that B34 and the YG17, and then I'm also going to bring in the Prismacolor in cream. I'm going to go over a few of the highlighted areas where I just have that YG03. I'm not going to color over the top of all of that YG03. I don't need to do that. I can definitely allow some of this to shine through, and I'm just looking for highlights. The reason why I'm using the cream instead of a white is the white would be way too stark. The cream just kind of gives you the idea that it's a little bit lighter green as opposed to a stark white, and it's perfect. You don't always need to use a bunch of different colors when you're coloring things in, or especially when you're doing your colored pencil work. The nice thing about indigo blue is it's a nice universal color, so I can go over the top of these greens regardless of the underpainting underneath them, and I still see just a green. I don't see any blue, I just see the variations in those greens, and that's perfect. Plus, it saves me a little bit of time because I'm not bringing in an extra pencil, and that is perfect as well. Do be sure to check out yesterday's videos, folks. It is part of the Altenew blog hop. I color in the Wispy Begonia stamp set, and I talk more in that video about using minimal supplies to get the same amount of color variation and the same amount of depth in that video. It is actually a really, really lovely stamp set, and I thoroughly enjoyed coloring it in. And it's really interesting to see how you can use 2 Copics and 2 colored pencils and still get a gorgeous pink flower out of it. All right, folks, that is it. We are done. We're good to go. I have more details and links down in the description below, as well as over on my blog. So do be sure to check those out. I hope you enjoyed my card today. If you did, hit that like button and share it with your friends. Also, be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and tap that bell next to the subscribe button so you can receive all future notifications. Thanks again so much for stopping by. Until next time.